Welcome to the John Cady Podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. 2025 is drawn to a close. It's definitely been a wild ride for me. I don't know about anybody else who might be listening. Started off in tragedy, and then as the year progressed, it's been a time of reflection, a time of evaluation, and also a time for breakthrough and healing. I've experienced all this in the course of the last 11 months, almost 12 months now. And as I go into 2026, I would like to focus on one particular goal that I have, and I've already started on it as far as my growth as an activist, as a voice against abuse within religious organizations and churches, and that is being able to reach out and have dialogues with other influencers and activists whose views may not necessarily completely align with my own. And I've already been having conversations back and forth with a few of the influencers out there. One in particular hosts a podcast called Healed-ish. Her name is Jubilee. She and her husband run the podcast out of their home in Texas. And she came up through a very strict religious background, as I did. She was caught up in the purity culture, which in some ways was parallel to the strict environment that I dealt with in my former churches. Pentecostal churches were almost as strict on purity culture, but they didn't have purity rings and stuff like that. And I don't remember any teenagers at the churches I attended being told to sign a pledge that they were going to stay pure until they got married. However, in the church wherein I held license, they did have grown men, make vows to be celibate for the entirety of their lives in that organization, or what was referred to as the eunuchship doctrine. Other churches have taught it that as well, but what it did was it didn't serve the purpose of providing men who were available to go out in the highways and byways, but instead it provided a free labor pool for the church. Not to mention that under the founding pastor, it also provided a pool of men who were willing to engage into some unsavory things that I cannot say on social media without being hit with a community standards violation. But as I talk to people like Jubilee and others, I find that sometimes the religious background and the theology are different, and the deconstruction process differs from person to person. In my own case, I followed the approach of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That's a common practice. You look at, especially looking at the Bible, bouncing off what the Bible actually says, as opposed to what the church was teaching. And it's not a totally accurate process, but it definitely helps sort things out as far as what was taught that was valid and what wasn't taught, or what was taught that shouldn't have been taught. You keep the parts that are good and you discard the rest, and that's a valid way of deconstructing and healing. Some people are so badly traumatized by their experience that it takes a total and complete deconstruction, where basically you've got to break everything down and maybe even go scorched earth if one has to. And in some cases, the other influencers that I have crossed paths with, some have abandoned religion altogether. Some have gone into mainline Protestant theology. Others have become atheists. In the course of my conversations with these other activists, we should not lose sight of the common goal. And I'm learning that sometimes that we're not going to agree on everything. And that's perfectly okay, because it's not about agreeing on or disagreeing on theology. It's about sharing common experiences and revealing that there is a pattern that is found across all abusive religious organizations, regardless of what name is plastered over the church house doors. The love bombing, the grooming, the honeymoon phase that ends and then the hammer falls and the new members are now being forced to conform to the teachings that are very strict, to the point where it even isolates members from their families who are not affiliated with the church. So looking at it from that aspect, from a therapy aspect even, and no, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm just a podcaster, a retired Navy man who's experienced probably more crap in his life than I care to let on. in talking to these other activists and other influencers, it's like we're comparing notes. Even though our opinions on certain things are going to be different, when it comes to the manner of abuse that goes on, we're comparing notes. And we're looking like, yeah, I've seen this too. Yeah, we had a pastor who did that. We had a pastor who liked to groom people. We had a youth leader who put hidden cameras in the ladies' bathroom. Ew. Some of the stuff that they talk about at these youth meetings. And it makes me question, well, I'm surprised nobody's called Chris Hansen. I also look at it as like, why didn't anybody in the church, and this is another thing we've talked about, that people are so caught up in the personality of these religious figures, they don't see what people on the outside see, and that is, they see something going on that just isn't right. Like, for example, why is the pastor, for example, driving these expensive brand new cars, and you're still driving the same broke down old car that you're holding together, for the last 13, 14 years? Also, regardless of what happens, why is it that some churches have 3x5 cards that you have to fill out saying that you're going to be loyal to the pastor and to that ministry? Hey, I've experienced that myself. The day that those 3x5 cards showed up, that was the day I left. I've touched on that in previous podcasts. That's one of my goals going into 2026, is that as I grow in the role of an activist for spiritual reform in churches, that the goal is to find the commonality across all the people I talk to, because even if our personal theology and beliefs are going to differ, it's still going to be a process of comparing notes, because it's like, yeah, I've been there. I've been there too. So this isn't just restricted to any one denomination, any one organization or ministry. It's a common problem. It's a mindset that seems to be common across all abusers, regardless of what stripe they come from. 2026 should be exciting in that aspect, and I'm looking forward to being able to talk more with other influencers and be able to learn more from their perspective as well. This is John Cady. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll be catching you on the next one.